I've got Emily Wilson here. She is from the Red Cross, America Red Cross. She's the manager of leadership development. We're going to be having a little bit more of an interview-esque style conversation. So I told you were going to get more of having to put up with me. So my face will be on screen here. So Emily, good to see you. You're still on mute. I'm warning you now because we're not going to hear you if you don't unmute us. There you go.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. It was so funny backstage when I was talking about how I was going to move people around. You're like, you're sticking up here with me, right? You know.
Like, wait.
Here's the part of the interview where I just go off camera and disappear. Yeah, right. Well, can we get a round of emojis for Emily? We're going to be talking about supporting leaders in a high pressure environment, which I know enough from briefing about the conference to know some of the challenges that you face in the environment you're in, not only in these high pressure environments, but you're dealing with volunteers. And it's a very different environment than probably most people are used to when it comes to this. So a little bit of background on you, like how did you get in with the American Red Cross? Like what's your tie into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Red Cross has been around since 1881, probably one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known humanitarian service agencies. It's really, the organization has adapted a lot through the years. We have multiple lines of business. So many people know about our blood collection, so our biomedical area. And then I work in disaster cycle services, which is the area that responds to ongoing natural disasters, big and small. We also do responses to home fires. So I had been a blood donor for many years and had a lot of admiration for Red Cross. And a friend of mine said, there's this job you should apply for. And so here I am.
So here
I have a background in instructional design. I was in higher ed for a decade before I came to Red Cross.
Okay. I love that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these challenges. Cause it is, like I said, it's unique. It's not necessarily the same things that, even I've worked in healthcare a long time. And even that, there's different, just because you say, oh, I work in healthcare, it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Like I got to ask like 30 other follow-up questions. So what is that environment like?
Yeah. I will say it's really different depending on what you do with Red Cross. And I'm talking like narrowing down to disaster cycle services. I mean, we are constantly managing the priority between response and what we would call like an operational state. So where we are out in the community, we have an operation running at the time. We have leaders out there leading people on that operation. It's chaotic, especially at the beginning. Lots of unpredictability, ambiguity. You don't have a whole lot of control over the natural environment and what happens. But you need leaders. You need good leaders in those types of situations.
I would say that's like the ultimate pressure cooker for leadership. Because I mean, it really is. Like, it's one thing to be a leader, and it's not ever, I would say it's never easy to lead, but it's really when you're in the furnace, when it's like, okay, we don't know what's happening. Things are changing. It's kind of all over that's the real test of leadership right there.
Absolutely. I mean, being able to navigate that level of chaos and that level of, there's no clear answer, and you don't know what's coming at you next. You have to have the confidence to be able to make good decisions. The other thing is you really need to have good people skills. You need to have good interpersonal skills because, especially during operations, most of the people there that are doing the work are volunteers, and they have so graciously given up their time. And I'm not talking about like a few hours at a time. We do have disaster event-based volunteers who will come from the local community. They'll work a few hours, but our deployed responders, whether they're at kind of our service associate level, which is the entry level, or their leaders, they're giving out multiple weeks of 12 plus hour days. Of constantly being moving, constantly working.
Intense.
Yes. With clients, intense. A lot of times with people who've experienced the worst possible day of their lives, who are traumatized. It's a very, very hard job.
It is.
I mean, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean,
and they're volunteers, so they don't have to be there.
And it actually even just occurred to me, you're dealing with people in one of their hardest moments. So like I grew up in a funeral home, And I'm very familiar. Like when people are at their worst, when they're going through their hardest, it's compounded because even when you're trying to help, they're just a total wreck. And you're like, I'm trying to help you, but it's so, yeah, you, yeah. Okay. You got some real leadership challenges on you.
We do for sure. And I think I come from, coming from higher ed, you're talking about folks who are in paid positions, and I work for a state university, so people still came to our leadership development out of the goodness of, out of their desire to learn. They weren't paid to be there.
Yeah.
But they were at least still, they're drawing a paycheck. These are folks who are coming to give of themselves
own time
and to lead. And some of them do have lots of prior leadership experience. Some do not. Some, this is their pathway. We have all ages. We have all ability levels. We have a really, really diverse audience, which makes it challenging to try to find a solution that meets everybody's needs.
Well, and I have to imagine on top of it, because this is a mistake I think a lot of companies and everything make. Like we assume even just because somebody's been in a leadership role, they know what it means to be a good leader. And it's like, that's not true. Like most people are just leading based on how their parents treated them growing up. It's like, I don't know. That's just what my parents did for me. So I think that's what I'm supposed to do, which often is not a good thing. And so you've got that. But then on top of it, you've got this unique blend of leadership skills, but there's also some very technical safety related. Like I remember I grew up around a river and it would flood. And when it did, it was serious. And the Red Cross would come in and like you were dealing with people's lives. Like it wasn't just like, oh, go clean up some trash. It was like, no, if you do this, people could fall in and die. So there's some real technical safety things that you're dealing with around this as well. So there's no shortage of complexity. And it's not just the like, how do you bring out the best in the people around you? It's like, yeah, there's that. But then there's also when do you grab people by the back of the neck and go, knock it off? You're going to kill somebody.
Yes, you have to have the ability to think on your feet and make confident decisions and, think critically about, we have a world where we feel like, okay. And as an organization, we have a lot of processes and procedures. And our training is very traditional, and it reflects that because we do have a lot of technical expertise that we need to have in our various activities.
Yeah.
And so what we tend to do, and we are not alone. This is what I have told people. I haven't been at Red Cross that long, but everywhere else I've been before, people get promoted into positions because they're subject matter experts, because they're good at doing the job that they now need to lead people doing, not necessarily because they have leadership skills.
Yeah. Sometimes they're the worst.
And yes, that can be, I didn't say they're the worst, but
I can. I'm the host. I can say it. Sometimes the subject matter experts are the worst leaders because they're the ones that are like, just do it like I did. And you're like, that doesn't work.
Right. Or it used to work, or it worked, 10 years ago when we were doing things differently, when the world was different. The world is not that different. I mean, it's not the same. It's a very different environment.
So then you've got all these technical procedures. I mean, obviously lots of safety, health, formal stuff, but then you come to the table and you go, we're going to try and do more with this microlearning. So what was that turning point? And also I have to imagine that wasn't necessarily immediately met with, what a brilliant idea. Like, let's just move away from things and do things differently.
Well, no, for sure. I mean, we're still in the change cycle part of this, full disclosure. So we've had a little bit going on this winter. I don't know if anybody's heard, there's been some wildfires, there's been some floods at times that
I don't know anything about that. Are you saying there's been some like natural disasters that have wreaked absolute havoc on everything?
Yes. I mean, just a few, and at times where that's one of our challenges that we're dealing with is, it's not just we have a disaster season, right? It's all the time. There are always things going on. And so it makes it hard to say, this is something new that we want to do, especially because part of the idea that I have, the turning point for me, I've had this as an idea since I started at Red Cross. But what really made the connection for me was I got to deploy. So that's a great benefit of our employment. It's a perk of our job. We get to go and actually respond to a disaster. Cool. I happen to live in Western North Carolina, and I got to go and respond to the disaster with Hurricane Helene. And when I went as a service associate at the lowest level, right? I had no experience. Yeah. Of course, I walked in from national headquarters and everybody's like, you know everything. And I'm like, I know nothing.
Oh, you're like, you know what you're doing, right? Like, right. No, I don't actually. Pretend I don't know anything. Thank you.
Yeah, just pretend I don't. Pretend I'm off the street. So, but I saw things and made connections, and I saw leaders dealing with challenges, and I thought that we could help. Like, we could do things to help. And I think what could help is if we would use a micro-learning strategy where we would say, okay, when you get assigned to your disaster relief operation, we're going to send you a module that is like 3 to 5 minutes. So a mini course. It's going to just come straight to you through we have an app that we use called Volunteer Connection. It's going to come straight there to you, or you might get an email or a text. It's a link. And you go and you take this course, and it reminds you all the things you need to do to prepare yourself mentally and physically before you go to before you show up and get on the plane. Okay. And then when you get there on your first day, it reminds you to do the next set of things. And then on day 3, when you're really getting your teams established, it's talking to you about how you lead that team and how you address their needs at that particular point. And then when you're at day 5, when the sleep deprivation and the long days are starting to add up for everyone, that is when we say, you know what? Here are things that you can do to take care of yourself and your team, so you avoid some of those things that could cause stuff to go off the rails, right?
So you're meeting people where they are based on what you know. Like, we know you're at this point. So rather than jam it all down your throat, here's the kitchen sink of everything. When right now you're just fighting this fire, sometimes literally, it's like, just, this is what you need to know to get through today. But now we've been around the block enough to know by day 5, you're hitting this wall right now. And this is what you're going to need to get through day 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to be short. It's got to be very, very short. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, if even 5, because I mean, I'll be honest, like, I think I ate an actual lunch when I was on my deployment, like twice.
Yeah, I mean, I've done Red Cross stuff, and you just don't. Like, you're running on pure adrenaline. I mean, you're just on pure adrenaline for like days.
I ate food. Yeah, I ate food. I just didn't go and like sit somewhere and eat. You don't have that time. You don't have that time to just sit and like decompress. So thinking, okay, we're going to add another thing in. What we really have to do is communicate that this is going to be a resource for people that is going to give them. It's like almost like a hype man, you know, like you can do this. We believe in you. Here are some tools.
It's a weird combination of inspiration, motivation, and clarity on what to do. You've got to blend that together, because some of it's just going, I see where you are right now and it sucks.
Yes.
Here's how to navigate that.
Yes. Here's what you might need to know today. Here are resources that you have. So that's
on that, I want to pause on here, because Priscilla had a really good question. And I think it ties to this, because she'd asked, how do you prepare for the unexpected? And because, like you said, it's always changing and everything's always moving. But in some ways, even listening to you talk about this, there's some consistency in that microlearning actually allows you to kind of tap into, where it's like, well, this might be slightly different, but it's also oddly familiar. And so we can you've got the infrastructure to play with that. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, I have an idea to do this on a disaster relief operation with leaders. Okay. But we also could use this. We do a lot of preparedness. I mean, we do a lot of it. I've only really talked about our operational type work that we do, but there's a whole nother steady state when we're not responding to things. And there are all types of preparedness initiatives that we do. And we work with communities to try to help them be more prepared for their own disaster, so their community can respond. So there's no shortage of ways that we can use this as a communication tool, as an education tool for our partners. I'm not working on that particular project, but there's someone else at our organization who is. At getting our partners maybe able to do some things that are, working alongside us that don't require 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hours worth of training to do. It has a lot of applications in getting people ready to get out there and do things. do the work that we need to do. So.
Well, and I think going back to Priscilla's question of adapting like that, by keeping it snackable like that, you're able to hit them with something at that time where it's like, okay, you can't predict this, but we do know that you're probably facing this, and this is what you're going to need to get through that. Going back to your point of like, I need to make a critical decision right now. What tools do I need to be able to do that? So I'm curious, what's been the response? Like, how have people responded? Because there was a time where I led regulatory pharma, and it was all SOPs and it was all this stuff. And there's a lot of detail. And so when you do this, the response can be unexpected sometimes. So I'm curious what the response was for people.
Well, again, full disclosure, we are still very much working out logistics.
That's fair. I'm not saying you've cracked the whole nut, but
we have definitely not cracked the whole nut. But what I will say is that no one has said to me, that sounds like a terrible idea. We should not do that.
Well, that's
no one is going to do that. Everyone has said, that could work. And let's do this. So it's very much a yes and type situation rather than a yes, but. And so that I think has been really exciting for me, is that people are saying, you're right. We have to start like honoring that idea that our learners aren't going to be a captive audience for hours and hours, right? Yeah. Especially as volunteers.
It's just a reality of things. As much as you'd like to go, of course, ideally it'd be great if we could pull them together and we could do all this stuff. We can't. So let's just accept that as a fact.
Right. And we want to be able to do that for leaders as they continue to move along this continuum. But when we're trying to bring people in and we're trying to get people like ready, boots on the ground, we need to have things that are short, they're interactive, they're punchy, they're dynamic, they're improving retention, and they're not a barrier to people doing that extra bit of learning that's going to help them get through their day successfully. So, maybe in a little while I can come back and tell you like what our great data that we have from it and how we've used it to move the needle. But,
well, and I want to bring up as we're doing this, I'm going to actually bring up the one slide you have that has the two pieces on here, just to kind of, because we're coming into the home stretch. And, in terms of the design of this, for people who want to get a chance to actually see it and experience some of the work you've done, you have these two examples. But like, as you think about this, and as you've been designing, and again, you're early in the journey or you're still working through the journey, what kind of tips, experiences? I mean, because what we described, honestly, is the perfect storm of a content creator of like, I'd love to do that. People maybe nod and say, we'd like to, but you're fighting fires and floods and hurricanes and tornadoes, and that creates a lot of stress. So what tips would you have for folks?
So actually, I will say I've been using 7TAPS since like 2022 for other contexts. And so I actually find it easier to use because one, there's that AI tool, which is phenomenal. And two, you can put a PowerPoint, you can upload a PowerPoint in there and it can, and it will work on, condensing it all for you. What I think, the reason I actually think it's easier beyond just those tools is that you really, really have to zero in on the thing that's the most important. You cannot do it all in that many slides. You've got to use plain language. You have to use images. You have to use GIFs. You have to get 2 or 3 sentences at the most on a card. And they need to be the things you want people to walk away with. And they're going to retain it. That's the thing. They're going to retain it because it's small, because they've learned it right then. It's already locked in their mind. Hopefully at the end you're doing some, throughout you're doing knowledge checks, but at the end, what I've got is, do you feel more confident now to be a supervisor, to lead? That's the question I want to know. And that's the data I'm looking for. After you did this 3 minutes, do you feel more confident in being able to lead people? That's what I want to know. So someday I'll have that information.
Well, and I think, to your point, there's this tendency, and it's not even just coming from us. It comes from subject matter experts. It comes from leaders. Like we want to make the Franken course. Oh, well, while we're telling them this, like, let's also tell them this. And while we've got them, let's add this. And you know what? By the time you're done, you've created a PhD in, preparing to deploy as a supervisor. And it's like, okay, well, they're not going to remember any of this now. And now anything we actually want them to walk away with is lost in the sea of noise. And what you're talking about is really going, and you've got the benefit, I guess it's a benefit and a curse in some ways, of going, look, we only have this long. We only have this much time. What is the most important thing that we cannot have them miss? And yes, we can put all that stuff elsewhere, going back to your yes, and we'll put that other stuff elsewhere. But what is the essential? And let's get that to them.
Yep, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, Emily, this has been absolutely fantastic. Can we get a big round of emojis for Emily? And again, we'll send you a care package or something like that, because you really you've got your work cut out for you. And I love the way you're doing it. I checked out some of the stuff you've created. You've also done a really elegant job of your content creation. So it's fantastically done. I think the design you've done, the approach you're taking, kudos. You've got a vote of confidence from me in the way you're approaching it. And I think to all the people out there volunteering and helping people in these crisis situations, I think they owe you a great nod of gratitude for that. So thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing your story.
Yeah, I don't need gratitude, but what I would love is, if you're eligible, go give blood.
Well, there
and
you
if
go.
you are affected, if your community is affected by a disaster, get involved and go and serve, because that's why we do it, right? We're not there to get kudos. We're there because we get the warm heart.
And I think that speaks to your heart and the heart of the organization, which is, it's not really about us. It's about being there for people in their moment of need. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for having me.